Autologous CAR T cell therapies represent a bright spot, perhaps the brightest spot on an ATMP landscape that's all at once brimming with promise and beleaguered by clinical letdowns. Dr. Kristin Yamera, newly appointed CEO at clinical stage CAR T developer Poseida Therapeutics, knows this very well. And yet, she and Poseida are all in, not on autologous CAR Ts, but are instead developing a pipeline of healthy donor-derived CAR T therapeutics, the allogeneic approach. The company's underlying intention is to change the cell therapy accessibility paradigm by leveraging the manufacturing and economic scale benefits of a one-to-many off-the-shelf approach. Poseida's candidates are many and its support strong. It's got clinical programs in multiple myeloma and B-cell malignancies in partnership with Roche. And it just recently freshened up a deal with Astellas to support its solid tumor programs. I'm Matt Pillar. This is the Business of Biotech, and longtime listeners might recall that Poseida founder and then CEO Eric Ostertag joined me on the podcast a few years back. Well, today I'm excited to catch up on the company with Dr. Yarema, who was president of the cell therapy practice there for less than a year before taking on the CEO role in January of this year. Dr. Yarema, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Matt. I am just thrilled to be here.
I'm thrilled to have you here, and I always kind of follow an arc in my interviews, and no matter how uncomfortable it makes my biotech exec guests feel, I like to get a little bit of background on you and why you're doing what you're doing. And perusing your LinkedIn profile, it's not hard to kind of follow a little bit of a trajectory there. After earning your PhD in chemical and biomolecular engineering, doing a Max Planck fellowship, you joined McKinsey, which is not super uncommon among the biotech execs that I've interviewed. It's sort of a springboard into multiple things, but I want to kind of get your perspective in your own words without making assumptions on sort of what you were thinking about doing when you joined McKinsey and what sort of a career you were looking to form up at the time, whether it was sort of orchestrated or you were just kind of feeling out the waters. What was kind of going on then?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the time that I was finishing all of my scientific work, I think I would say I had come to the conclusion that I was industry ready. I love the science. I always loved everything that I was doing, and I carry that passion with me even today. But I had come to the conclusion that I was probably less wired to go and be the world expert in a narrow scientific field. Although I could have gone that path, and that was probably the dream I had had since I was 10 years old. But I realized that I would be happier and probably more productive by spreading my energies and my efforts across a wide range of areas. And I really wanted to have more immediate impact. I was always very much about impact. That's why I chose engineering over a pure scientific training, actually, right? I always wanted to be working on things that were very applied. I wanted to see, the fruits of the project in quite real time. And so I started to think, okay, I'm probably not a lifetime academic here. I need to get into industry, specifically medicine. And I had some medical members of my family, practitioners, nobody really in biopharma research. And so I thought, okay, that's my next step. And I could have gone to be an industry scientist. That was a very viable path. But at that time, McKinsey and some of the other consultancies were recruiting new PhDs and PhD students very heavily because they had come to the conclusion that they often made excellent management consultants. And it had to do with how they approached their work. So their approach to their work was really, as I saw it, applying the scientific method, but to business problems. So you get a problem, you formulate a hypothesis, you go and investigate, you come to some conclusions, you present them. And I thought to myself, hey, that's great. I can do that. I can formulate hypotheses about anything and go and investigate them. And so I'll see where that leads me. I'll get an overview of the biotech and biopharma industry. I was very clear with McKinsey that I really wanted to focus in healthcare, and they gave me the opportunity to do that. And see if this was the industry for me, get closer to the front end of the healthcare system and start working on, medicines that were either already on the market or things that would be near the clinic. And, it was really a fantastic opportunity to do that. Consultants are so expensive that whatever they're working on, the project that they're hired for, it's always of great importance to the company, because otherwise, why would you splash out, expensive consulting dollars for that? So, early in your career, it's a fantastic way to see many, many different companies and many different products and areas. So I worked for 19 of the top 20 pharma companies at that time, a whole lot of biotechs. I did growth strategy, R&D strategy, quite a bit of org work, product turnaround, like just about every conceivable sort of project. And so, I left with, I think, a really good understanding of the landscape of the biopharma industry. And, that led me to the conclusion that this is where I want it to be.
Yeah, that's really cool. The intent of this podcast from the outset and it remains is to inspire and educate your peer biotech execs. I mean, there's a great community of biotech execs, upstart biotech execs, and this podcast was sort of created to create a forum for them and a source of information. But one of the more interesting and rewarding elements of this pod, I mean, we're 200 and I think this will be like 212 some episodes in. One of the more rewarding aspects is the feedback that I get and the questions that I get from people who are still in academia and are considering pursuing a career in big pharma or biotech or biopharma. And a question that I'm often asked is like, what do I do once I have my PhD? Like, the people that you've interviewed, they've come at it from all different angles. What's the most efficient path? And it sounds to me like this consulting opportunity was an efficient path for you, because the other aspect of that is like a lot of the students who come out, even seasoned execs who come out of academia, for instance, or practicing physicians, when they decide that they're going to go into industry, they struggle mightily with the transition to business. Yeah. Would you agree with that? And would you suggest perhaps like the consultancy route is a pretty...
I would, yeah. For me, it was fantastic. So what I would say is you will work very hard, but you will see a lot. You will see many, many different, projects, many different companies. And I think the pattern recognition is really very powerful because it helps you become very calibrated, right? You learn, this challenge has been faced by many other companies many times before. It's always going to feel unique and very present to that current situation or that current team. But you will say, yeah, I've seen this 10 times before. And by the way, every other company is facing exactly the same questions and challenges. Here's some ideas that I picked up that might be relevant, or here's why your situation is a little bit unique, relative to others. So I think it's, there's a lot of travel and there's a lot of hard work involved, but it's really an excellent training ground. And I think the other piece that for me was very important was, working in consulting, which is a team-based approach, and it's client service, right? Which can be challenging. You have a customer, you have a client, company. It really taught me a lot about how to work effectively in teams, how to be a leader of teams and organizations, and how to bring people together cross-functionally to solve very, very complicated problems. So, as a student or a researcher, I was very good at solving problems myself, that I had defined. Mm-hmm. But I did not receive training how to solve very complicated problems that required inputs from lots of different people or places, and how to move things that require efforts from many people forward effectively. I don't think academia is a great training ground for that, but you do it all the time, when you're, parachuted in as a consultant, or because a lot of the projects you have to go around and work with many, many different areas of the company. So, now I see, tremendous power, and where I am today, I think much less about my job as, I need to solve X. That is not my job. My job is, the path for the company forward needs to be charted, or we need to solve XYZ problems as a company. And what I need to do is ensure that that happens somehow, involving or bringing together whatever people or resources or outside experts or whatever is needed to do the task. So I think that experience in particular is very different, or can be very different, in industry versus in academia. And you mentioned that people sometimes struggle with transition. What I've seen is it can often be about that. It's not about the science. It's not about the medicine. It's about, how do I fit into a corporate environment and get things done?
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing that I hear quite frequently is the struggle with the language, right? Like it's a whole different vocabulary.
Yes.
And you learn that vocabulary, I'm sure, pretty quickly working at McKinsey. Speaking of vocabulary, digging even further back into your academic days, I've got a question for you about the duality of Dr. Kristin Yarema. Before you earned your PhD, you doubled up your undergrad efforts at Stanford in biochemical and biomolecular engineering. You also earned a BA in English literature, both with honors, I might add. It begs the question, like, what's behind that? Like, were you like, what was it? A conscious effort to balance out your left and right brain equilibrium? Like, what's
Yeah.
the story
Well,
there?
Matt, I got to hand it to you. You have really done your homework on me. But but I suppose the answer is yes. In fact, it's why I elected to go to Stanford in the first place. I was looking for a school that was very strong as an undergraduate, very strong in the technical disciplines, and very strong in the arts and humanities. And that, that is really a duality or a tension that I felt all my life. So, growing up, I was very much pulled to, science and math and technology, but also very much pulled to the arts and humanities, literature, music. It was so as an undergraduate, I elected not to choose. My choice was not was, decided not to decide, and pursued both of those. I ultimately concluded that I was likely to have more impact on, I don't know, the world at large, I suppose, by heading down the technical path and going into biopharma. And I've been very happy with that choice. I actually get more opportunity to exercise my creative juices than I would have expected in the industry. We have, lots of visual and verbal communication, to be sure. But I also think that bringing creativity to looking at drug development and commercialization, is really important. These molecules or cells, they do not come with instructions. And clinical development in particular, I think, is very strategic and often coming up with ideas that are not cookie cutter, not what everybody else did, as where you're going to build in your product differentiation, or where you're going to, take something that could have been an okay therapy and really make it, a remarkable one, which I've, been honored to have the opportunity to do, a few times in my career.
Yeah.
But I would also say, to anybody out there today who may be, feeling a similar, duality and similar tension, that I would not say that one could not have impact as, as an artist or someone in the humanities today. The older I get, the more I think, we really should be valuing as a society our artists just as much as our builders. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Well said. And I mean, you are a great communicator. That's quite obvious. So that English lit effort serves you well, and hopefully you still find time to read and enjoy, maybe even write a little bit.
absolutely.
You're welcome to write for Bioprocess Online anytime you'd like.
I may take you up on that.
Yeah. Uh, After McKinsey, you moved on to Big Bio, Novartis, and Amgen. So I'm curious about that. Like, what sort of precipitated the transition to Big Bio in particular?
Yeah. Well, I had always thought that I would, move to industry at the right time. I actually stayed in consulting longer than I anticipated just because I enjoyed it so much. For me, the right time ultimately became when I got married to another consultant, by the way. And, it was like, okay, it's time to stop running around the globe, stop traveling, have something that keeps me in one place a little bit more. And so, that led me to taking the first role at Novartis and later Amgen, as you said. So it was always a planned transition, I guess. Why big bio and not biotech to start with? Well, I had more familiarity with the big company setting because more of the clients as a consultant were big companies because they can afford it. And I felt I knew how to navigate that setting pretty well. Really liked what Novartis was doing at the time, and I got a absolutely great first role. I came in and I was really overseeing all of the commercial inputs and product strategy for a huge chunk of Novartis's pipeline. It was everything outside of oncology, which was a little ironic because in McKinsey, I was kind of known as the oncology person, and my PhD was kind of in oncology. But you kind of go where you're needed, and so that was an opportunity to learn everything else. And I would say that's, I think that's a good first move because large companies have lots of experience, they have lots of resources, and I don't just mean financial resources, but I mean other people, knowledgeable people. So you can really continue to learn a lot. And it's different being inside a company than as a consultant. Consultant, you also learn a lot, but it's different being a part of the machinery versus just, helping tinker with it from the outside, I suppose.
Yeah. Did your husband follow suit eventually and join
Oh
industry?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. In fact, there was a time when we kept, going around to different companies together. We were at 3 companies in a row together, obviously not in the same job, but it was a very interesting two-body problem. When we left, large biopharma eventually and moved to biotechs, now we don't cross paths really anymore. But it was interesting. It was fun. I think it's good to have someone who understands the frame of reference that you're working with every day. You just have to
That's
make sure you're not talking about, work too much off the clock.
all the time. Yeah. Yeah. It's a novel frame of reference for sure. What was the, I guess, modus operandi when you did leave big bio and move into biotech? That was with Atara.
Yes, yes, with Atara, exactly. So, you know, uh, back when I was still doing research, when I was a researcher, some of the areas that I was working on were things that just at that time were not ready for prime time. So it was the very early days of working with cells. We were doing hollow fiber bioreactors. Synthetic biology was kind of really just emerging. None of this stuff was really ready for prime time. Like the very first tyrosine kinase inhibitors, which are now, you know, bog standard in many, cancers as treatment were just being discovered. So I had always been really energized by these advanced modalities and advanced therapies, but we just weren't there yet back in those days. But I had kept my eye on the space and always thought that cell therapy was particularly exciting. And so when I got the call, which came in through my network, not through a recruiter, got the call from Pascal Touchon, the CEO of Atara Biotherapeutics. I thought, okay, I wasn't looking at the time, but I was like, this is the one. This is the opportunity to finally make the move for because it was something that I was really passionate about. I looked at the technology. I had seen so many drugs, scores, hundreds of drugs, feel very calibrated on separating the wheat from the chaff at this stage. And I said, okay, I think what they're doing is really important and is likely to work. And I liked the people. It's another piece of guidance that I would give to people considering that transition. A large, biopharma there are many, if you don't like the situation you are in, you can always go to another therapeutic area, or maybe you can, if you're a commercial person, you can go to a different country even. In a small company, the people are the people, those are the people. You had better like them. You are going to spend a lot of time with them. So make your choice very carefully, not just based on the technology, which is table stakes, and you better like that too, but also really on the cultural fit. And if you think you're going to be excited to work with these people. So all of that fit for me. I joined Atara, as you said, a couple of weeks before the pandemic started, literally, which was, very interesting onboarding experience, in and of itself. And I joined as Chief Commercial Officer. I also had corporate communications as part of that. And Atara's an amazing company. It was really, words cannot describe what it was like to be part of the team and the organization that got the world's first ever allogeneic T-cell immunotherapy through approval. It's a product called Ebvallo, for a rare type of lymphoma that transplant patients can sometimes get. And it is terrible. Patients who fail their first therapy for PTLD have a median life expectancy of something like 3 weeks. So it's very serious, very acute, and you really need a powerful and immediately available therapy to do that. So Ebvallo is an allogeneic T-cell immunotherapy that is now available for these patients in Europe and hopefully soon in the US as well.